making the moves, get out of the way, we coming through. We got this, never stopping, and we won't lose. No, we can't lose. Yeah.
It really has felt a little bit like the Jordan Ross show over the first 4 rounds of your 22nd season of the RaceKraft V8 Veterans Championship. He's been nigh on flawless, and everyone else has had to try and adapt to a new way of driving. A brand new car, a brand new season, but when it comes to car building, is there any track with more heritage than this city which we race in? The Motor City, Detroit Belle Isle. It's your Detroit 150, and we are stoked for it here with SimSpeed TV. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone watching around the world. My name's Jake Sperry. Alongside me for today's action is David Haynes. Got Dan Yeaman in the production truck for us today. And David, this is what we call for the first time this season a really difficult circuit. We're at street circuit level for what is the first time this season, and this is going to be where the true racing drivers are tested.
Yeah, V8 Vets isn't scared of a street circuit here and there, been to Long Beach, been around to a whole heap of them. This is one of the tightest street circuits to be found anywhere. It can be found here in Detroit, specifically Belle Isle, just in the river, in the Seaway off Detroit, in amongst the parklands. All sorts around here. Big, beautiful fountain, nice little lakes. I think there's almost an arboretum type thing going on over there. Lots to do when there's not racing on. When there is racing on, it's a delightful little racetrack because you've got a long straight from turn 2 down towards the braking zone at turn 3. You've got the long strand back straight in between the lake and the river there, looking across at Canada before the braking zone for turn 7. But the rest of the way around, it's pretty tight right in between those concrete walls.
Yeah, and you'll be seeing here that run across Strand Drive 1 and Strand Drive 2 being important. That all-importantly known 7-11 style complex that you run through from turn 7 to turn off of the Strand Drive over to turn 11, where you jump back on it here on a 14-turn circuit. And you've always got to be very alert. You've got those passing 90-degree corners that go in through the likes of turns 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then, of course, the final couple couple of corners of 12 and 13, which are devilishly difficult in the details to try and get navigated through. But that's going to be one part of the battle, navigating the track. The next part is going to be navigating all of the points and championship scenarios that these drivers run into, because we did say at the top of the show that this has been the Jordan Ross show. He has been absolutely fantastic at the way that he's been putting things together, but the big news is that he is being chased down. Paul Warwick now into second with Michael Whiting third, and you got your biggest shakers down there on the bottom of the graphic here. And I think it's really telling here, David, that Jason Benz made a really big push up after taking round 4, and then a non-start for the likes of Scott Mackey, for example, drops him down into 30th position.
Yeah, almost untouchable there at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Jason Benz sort of toyed with them, had a pretty strong win in what's normally an incredibly competitive field, and that netted him a whole heap of points. Scott Mackay, and therefore it drops him a few. Jordan Ross remains on top, 94 points clear of Paul Warwick, who's jumped up into second there. Michael Whiting in third, and Dan Hall, Troy Stonestreet as the top 5. Chris Burridge, David Nash, Greg Sharp, Gary Buckland, and Mark Poynton all moving up some positions in the championship order. The Nürburgring Nordschleife was an incredibly challenging racetrack. Very different to here, but very challenging racetrack. And a few drivers that mastered it, that know that track well and that are comfortable with it, really came away with some good points a week ago. That was then. This is now at Detroit.
Yes, and we go from one of the longest circuits in the world to maybe a little bit much more shorter in terms of its track length, but the difficulty curve is still pretty high up there as they challenge on forward. So we'll keep an eye on that as they go. Now today will be a 40-lap race, and to be classified, you've got to complete at least 75% of a race distance. So you've got to go at least 30 if you want to get yourself classified for points. And they've got themselves 50 litres of fuel with the fixed setup that they run to start, but they do have a full refuel capacity. So when you sit down and you look at what that means, they've got to make 2 compulsory pit stops. That pit stop window opens at the end of the second lap of the race, and effectively you could go and decide you could pit at the end of lap 2, at the end of lap 3, and then you're good to fill to the end. But I think that strategy is a little bit more nuanced than that.
Well, there's no perfect way to plan for the strategy, because there's no perfect way of predicting, will there be a safety car? When will there be a safety car? How many safety cars might there be? So when we go to look at the compulsory pit stop rules, it'll be very interesting around the safety cars, how this works. We had this at round 1 at Watkins Glen. The safety car was called before the end of lap 1, so the compulsory pit stop window did not open on lap 2, as we had been under safety car since before the end of lap 1. It was a very sort of little thing. If we do get a safety car right off the bat on the opening lap of this race, doesn't open the compulsory pit stop window just yet. Drivers have got to make 2. It's a 150-kilometre race, so it's a bit shorter than some of the others. You can have your fuel to get to the end in very early. If there's even a safety car in the first third of the race, you could gamble on really front-loading your stops if you pitted on lap 2 or 3.
You certainly can, and we can keep an eye on that. And this is your fuel numbers in terms of pit strategy. Now, it looks pretty interesting in terms of how much time you're expected to be dealing with the fuel. We're looking at even to late stops. I don't think there's that much of a difference here, David, between them at the moment. You look at how much fuel you put in. It's the difference between putting in a lot of fuel at a pit stop and not as much. So getting a broader sense, or running light, so to speak, at the end. You could go as far as lap 16, you feel, and get yourself a good run in terms of the fuel gain. But the difference in terms of lane transit doesn't seem like very much to go through. Maybe about half a second's difference between the even stop and those going a little later.
Yeah, so basically you got the amount of fuel that you're going to have to take from the start to get to the end. And it's about how do you split that up across your 2 stops? Do you front load it a bit in your first stop? Do you take a short first stop, get a whole bunch of track position, which could be key on this racing circuit, but then have to take a whole bunch later, strategy that could come back to bite you if there's a safety car that comes out while you're still waiting on taking a big fuel drop, because it'll bunch the field and then you'll be waiting a long time in the pit stop and others will jump you. So the key numbers there is the starting fuel is 50 litres, no fuel saving required, 15 to 17 seconds just for the pit lane drive-through, so a pretty short pit lane here, even if it's not super quick. And 9 seconds of fuel will be enough to cover the tyre change. You'd expect you'd just change all 4 at both stops, unless you ended up with just a teeny tiny splash with a very late safety car or something like that.
Well, if you need that tiny late splash, I'm sure that it's going to be a good case for some drivers out there to really find themselves a chance. I expect that positioning is going to be a little bit fraught and scrambled at certain places. This is a track of track position, so keep an eye out on drivers wanting to extend out if a safety car comes out, wanting to stay in front, and actually wanting to go long. I think is going to be really quite telling. Qualifying then is just about to be wrapped up in the books then here at the Motor City. So it looks like it's going to be a pole position for Jordan Ross as things stand with about 5 seconds remaining. They've had 10 minutes to set representative flying times, and they've had 3 laps in order to conduct those in. I would say pretty standard in terms of qualifying, and not really that much of a difference through, I would say, the top 7 drivers, split at the moment by half a second as we take a look at our point scheme here. 181 points for a race win. 4-point increment down to second, 3-point increment down to third, and then 2-point increment from 4th place position, dropping all the way down the field. So if you finish even back there in 48th place. Now, there are also rewards for bonus points out there. Pole position's a point, fastest lap is a point if you finish inside the top 10. No instant points over the course of the race, and this might be a circuit where you could find it more than others, is going to be 3 points, which is an extra point on top of last season. A point for leading a lap, a point for leading the most laps, and crucially, join the Zoom call, show your face. That's a free point.
Yep, Jungle Bear has 1 point, but he's never taken a pole position or a fastest lap. Lots of little bonus points there are key if you're going to try to sort of really take the grand slam of maximum points away from any particular round. This is our drivers getting that bonus point for joining the Zoom. So Tim Nicol in the top left. There's Damien Cairns with his bright gloves on. Scott Gamble, I think his seat's currently empty. Oh, and he's about to get in. Travis Hunt there, focused with all of his sound deadening material over his shoulder. Jeff Thomas giving us a good view of the shifter. Dan Hall also just out of the car at the moment, but getting ready, taking a look at strategy, taking a look at what's going on. Quick break there for Sean McNamara. David Kirby's getting the warm-up in. Greg Sharp with the VR headset on. He's got the emergency stop button next to his force feedback wheel in case those massive guns aren't enough to stop the wheel. I can see Christian Smart there, I think, getting his warm-up in. Ken Latter. Got Chad Lewis also just, I think, practicing his standing start, perhaps. Definitely something to keep an eye on. And Jonathan Gallen there looking very, very intense with his hands on the wheel.
Yeah, and you've got to be very intense with the hands on the wheel because of the fact that you've got so much force feedback coming through that steering wheel, and drivers will like certain amounts of force feedback compared to others, and you need them around this Belle Isle circuit. Incredibly bumpy out there through certain sections, and you have to be pretty much pixel perfect when you put down the throttle here because the car will want to go and step out at each and every single opportunity, and you're seeing the final sections of warm-up now starting to be applied here. Drivers looking to try and get as much as they can ready, be that their launch off of the start, be that just a final little run and understanding of the fuel. But there's your driver of the day from last time, brought to you by Chubby Buns Burgers. It is Chris Miller who found himself that result at round 4, having the 666 car drive pretty substantially well from the back of the field at the Nordschleife.
Yeah, Nordschleife is a tough track to pass as well, though, because there are incredibly long, sort of multiple minute-long sections where you can't really pass, and then you've just got to set it up on the 2 or 3 long straights per 10-minute lap, 8.5 minutes or so, as I think it was. And so it is actually surprisingly difficult in that amount of time to work your way all the way up through the field. Chris Miller made a lot of gains, and it was strategically an interesting race as well because of how narrow the pit window was with such large laps. Let's see who's today's Chubby Buns Burgers driver of the day after 150 kilometers of Detroit.
Well, we got 41 drivers in here, or 42 drivers potentially, I should say. And it is also worth noting out that we've got 4 splits worth of racing action in V8 Vets, your RaceKraft Simulations V8 Veterans League. And it is worth talking about the fact that this is just one split of 4. So that's 160 odd drivers who have all looked to put themselves together and say, this is our race and we're going to try and go as quickly as we possibly can. So that's going to be worth keeping in the back of the mind, that these drivers are up at the top split, are up at the best, and they will know what they're capable of racing, and they've raced against each other time and time again.
Yeah, expanding from 3 splits of the RaceKraft V8 Vets to 4, so mathematically with more drivers, this being the top split, it should be closer, more competitive, as it's now sort of a cream of the cream. If only the French had a phrase for that type situation. So really, we've got a few drivers that have come in the last couple of seasons already challenging up there. Jordan Ross, of course, were one of them, but the top split gets more and more competitive, and it should be the case that the racing and the drivers are more evenly matched through all of the other splits as well, and everyone should be able to race well.
Certainly can do. If you want to join, of course, and be part of the V8 Vets League, there's only one requirement. You've got to be at least 40 years of age and above, which I think puts all of us in the commentary booth as waiting for an invite later on in our lives at the moment. Checkered flag, though, is out in warm-up. We are going to take our first chance to look at the starting grid then for today's action at the Motor City Detroit Grand Prix Belle Isle, and it seemed pretty dominant in qualifying for car number 143, his lucky number, and it has served him well over the course of his career so far. It's Jordan Ross who finds himself on the pole position, and he will have alongside him for company Scott Gamble in the 9.5 SimSport car. Row 2 will have Sean McNamara who finds himself there in third position, the 951 car for 9.5 SimSport, and Jason Bent, who is there for XCM, in fourth position. Row 3 has Kenneth Latter for Fishy Motorsport, along with Mike Taliancic there in sixth position overall, with John Latham and Chris Burridge making up the fourth row of the grid for Shadow and M1 Racing, respectively. Then you've got Paul Warwick, who starts in ninth position, and Wayne Walker, who is looking to try and power forward. He starts from 10th place with a good qualifying time that's half a second off of the pace overall. Scott Mackey finds himself there in 11th position, along with Chris Miller, who was the winner of the driver of the day last time out. He'll go from 12th, a much better showcase for him in qualifying, with Michael Whiting and Mark Poynton, who's 10th in the championship for Frog League Juiced, who's there in the 7th row of the grid. Row 8 is Matt van der Kraan, who's there for the Angry Birds racing team, and Tim Nicol for Quantum, who finds himself there in 16th, which leads to row number 9, 17th and 18th, David Kirby and Jeff Thomas. You then find yourself onto row 10, where Luke Ullman finds himself alongside Stephen Grumley there for SLS Racing, and then over the page you've got the likes of Stephen Kennedy and Travis Hunt, who are there on the 11th row. 23rd will be Darren Crosby, along with Robert Griffiths, as Dan Hall's maybe a little bit out of position, starting this one off in 25th for the Evolution Racing team. He's got the WKMP SimSport car of Greg Sharp there in 26th position for company. If anyone needs a friend, it's Craig Friend. He's 27th there for the Old Mate and Sons team. He's got David Nash there on row 14. The 29th and 30th positions are housed out by Michael Stewart for Hypersonic and Rob Crisdale. Looking back through then the final 10 positions or so out there, Troy Stonestreet has Damien Cairns for company, 1 second, splitting the top 31 drivers, as Gary Buckland and Brad Doble are on the 17th, the 17th row of the grid. You've then got John Gallen and Stewie Hall, who are there with Stephen Varga and Matty Parker on 37th and 38th places. 39th and 40th belongs to Chad Lewis and Christian Smart, and the final 2 drivers who are out there on the grid will be Darren Goosey and Scott McCoon, who's there for Hypersonic Racing. Did not set a representative time in the number 7 77. But we are just about getting ready then for this start. A 3-minute hold, which is pretty much all but worked through at the moment. 40 laps available here today as they get themselves set. And remember, this is one where you've got to be very alert to the potentials out there. Expect at least 80 litres of fuel to be added over the course of this race. But as we get ourselves ready at Detroit, lights are on and lights are out, and we're underway. And Jordan Ross does not get a launch. It's one of the shortest runs to turn one, and he's been leapfrogged already on the way through. Scott Gamble gets the launch of a lifetime and moves himself into the race lead immediately. McNamara in third, Ben's fourth, latter under pressure now from Taliancic on the outside as they look towards turn number 3 out on circuit, diving down on the brakes. Who's going to be the bravest as they turn on through? It looks like Taliancic holds his 2-wide run, but it's all single file through the front 3 and 4.
Almost coming to a complete standstill at turn number 3 later in the field, but the front runners have made their way through. There is a little bit of grass, a little bit of spare space around there. Looks like everyone's still going. The track tightens up right up against the concrete barriers through here, and we've got our first cars around.
It's a big pile-up out there, and it's going to cause a huge amount of trouble as they all try to navigate their way through. Race control immediately on. I think that might be a safe look at it. Track's almost jammed. Luke Ullman for Team AGR, who finds himself wrong place, wrong time out there, and that's going to be a huge amount of trouble then to get things sorted. Likes of Dan Hall and Stewie Hall getting caught up. Not a day for hall monitors out there, and Michael Stewart, I think, also got caught up. It looks like we're still piloting around. It looks like it's just about cleared itself up, but that is not the start that they wanted there to the middle of the field.
Now, 2 Stewarts and 2 Halls in that, and an Allman as well. So everyone got going, thankfully, which we're very fortunate of. Not too much damage because it looked like a relatively clumsy but slow speed type thing. Now, I think we are to the start of the compulsory pit stop window here because we haven't gone safety car. But Michael Whiting may just have a drive-through penalty here for a jump start.
Yeah, you can see there the iRacing black flag next to his name. He was a little too eager on the throttle pedal when it got to the start of this race. So he's going to have to drive through, and we will see the pit lane transit time as he navigates his way on by, and does so without too much worry at all. So Scott Gamble, your race leader. Jordan Ross second. It's then Sean McNamara who finds himself in third, and they are starting to build that gap now to the group in 4th position on back. It's already up at 1 second, and we do expect to see a little bit of gappage around this track. Everyone's trying to get as much as they can out of it, and look at the way that they snake around here along Strand Drive 1, angling up for turn 7.
So perfect race start for Scott Gamble. When you're getting away off those race starts from a standing start, it's just difficult to find exactly precisely the perfect parameters for your launch. Jordan Ross didn't get it perfect. Scott Gamble did. Put himself into a great position now. You've got your top 3 getting away here. Sean McNamara and Scott Gamble do some good teamwork together as well. We've seen that before in previous rounds. Something Jordan Ross is going to have to look out for. But Ross obviously has an immense amount of pace between the concrete walls here to qualify on pole position. And Jason Bentz's confidence should be riding pretty high after a week ago as he leads the group in 4th place.
Yep, he should have some good confidence, but the difference maker is this. He was nearly a second slower than Jordan Ross, who's got the fastest lap next to his name, a 131.257, which is a championship point if you can hold on to it by staying inside the top 10 out there overall. So that's going to be worth a little bit of a look out there as he continues on, but at least for the time being, there is going to be a lot to try and navigate around the early stages. These walls, they are thick and fast. You've got to be so switched on through each and every section, and not really much movement inside the top 10. But you look here around about Steve Grumley, probably the best who's moved at the moment, up 5 spots out there in 15th position. So he certainly profited off of the start. Dan Hall being put at blame for the incident out there, and so he got the black flag penalty and has already come down to serve.
That's a good start from Grumley as well, having gotten ahead of Matt Vanderkraan and Tim Nexel, 2 very, very competitive drivers. So Dan Hall was trying to make a move at turn 5 by the looks of things, and that's where fenders started rubbing, cars got sideways, smoke in the air, and all but 4 cars got their way through there. Troy Stonestreet, another driver, has made a lot of positions. So from 31st on the grid to 24th, that's where he is right now. Compulsory pit stop window is open, but I am surprised that we didn't see anyone from the back half of the field sort of take the safety car gamble and just dump a load of fuel in right now.
Well, I think that drivers are looking around and saying, well, you can either take a gamble and be just completely out of it, or you've got to be a little bit more, I would say, into it and maybe go a bit further. So you've got to really look around and say, well, can I go to about lap 7, lap 8, as Chad Lewis, I think, does take that said gamble and takes the David Haynes strategy book there and decides, you know what, there's no harm for it, but at the moment, that's 3.3 second stop time, which I don't think's quite all there and together, so it looks like he's just put the tiniest amount in and decided, you know what, I'm coming straight back out and going again.
Yeah, it beats me. I'm seeing that as a very short stop as well, so maybe he had some damage or something else to sort out. So he's going to head to pit entry here. Got just a little bit wide there. It's a slightly late call, but not outrageously late call to head to the pit entry. There's a lot of shared pit stalls, of course, by the way.
So all he's got to do is stop in the box and get up on the jacks. That's what counts for a compulsory stop. And so what he does is the bare minimum.
Christian Smart getting a penalty. Yeah, but again, you've come out sort of nowhere with no track position. Why not take 10 seconds of fuel, and then that's 10 seconds less you're going to have to serve that if there is a safety car that catches you back up to the field.
Well, I suppose the other way of looking at it, as David Kirby dives into the pit, is that, you know, if there is a safety car, it's absolutely fine because you just fill up to what you need to go home. You don't lose any time in the delta as you jump. And speaking of which,
but you do if everyone pits under safety car and your pit stops longer. You get jumped by everyone because the queue will all roll by you.
Yeah, but you're at the back anyway, so it doesn't actually make that much of a difference, surely.
But the inverse would be if you took heaps of fuel, then got caught back up to the field by the safety car, then everyone pitted, you'd jump everyone.
That is also very true. So we're seeing different philosophies out there. 30.1 seconds from David Kirby, taking that philosophy and put as much as you can in. There is also that element of drivability. The car drives best around its starting fuel limit of about 50 litres. So you're driving a car that's overloaded, some would say, if you've got a little bit of fuel. So that's worth keeping in mind as things go. And we're seeing some of the first pit stops come in. It's a little bit a case of follow the leader through about 4th place on back. The front three, absolutely nose to tail right now in this 9-5 sandwich with Synergy Sim Racing filling in the middle. Jordan Ross looks like he is very racy today in terms of his pace, but Scott Campbell and Sean McNamara don't really want to rock the apple cart just yet. Diving through the opening corner at 132 kilometers an hour, looking to put the power over the bridge here on the exit of turn 2, where a General Motors safety car would definitely spin and find the barriers. But now here comes the look as we go on board and take a look at this driver's perspective running in towards turn 3, this 90-degree transit under the Lear signage, and this middle sector where you're always trying to gear up for the next corner available.
In real terms, it's quite a short race at 150 kilometres and just 40 laps of this racetrack, but strategically it's a long race because every car here is still going to need to make 2 stops. And so in the position of Sean McNamara, you might be thinking about that. I'm just here in 3rd place, but we've still got lots of stops to make, strategic decisions to happen. Safety cars are still not only possible, but incredibly likely. So you've got a lot to think about rather than just trying to send a dive bomb somewhere. You've got a couple of levers to pull.
You do. You've got a lot of different strategy cards that can be played over a course of a race like this one, but they're already building that margin out here, and what they're going to be looking at is, well, if they're out in front, they don't necessarily have that ability to pit because of the drivers who are in and around them. The longer that it takes in this race, the more that this field spreads out, the less that they have to deal with. That's a massive kick of oversteer on the power there for Jordan Ross, who's fighting against his car at the moment, and he's got to be a little bit more alert out there in his Mustang. That was trying to put him here, there, and everywhere. And here's another unique scenario out there. You got two 9.5 cars, first and third, but the leading 9.5 car is a Chevy Camaro. The car in third happens to be a Ford Mustang. So different cars out there for the 9.5 outfit.
What I'm noticing right here as well is how short the gears are. We had the very long gears for the very long straights of the Nürburgring Nordschleife, but here they're taking sort of stop-start 90-degree corners in third gear, going through the 1-2 sweeper in fourth gear, and so the car is very, very punchy on throttle out of these corners when you've got such a short differential, such short gears in it as well. That's another thing that's going to sort of eat into those rear tyres a little bit potentially. What I don't think we're seeing is anyone yet running out of top speed in sixth gear, which makes passing very difficult. If everyone's hitting the limiter, you can't slipstream the car in front.
Well, I saw a very close attempt just off screen from Wayne Walker, who's in 10th position. He's got his eyes firmly set on Chris Burridge in 9th in the number 42 car, which is the answer to life, universe, and everything, which is apparently M1 Racing out there. So there's certainly chances to go and make moves, and we'll take a look at it right now. And you can definitely sense there, coming out of turn 11, that there is a lot of work to be done when you're trying to put the power down. There's a lot of bumps and lumps here around this track, and they are always going to try and navigate it, and that just gives you an indication of how close to the wall they have to go each and every lap. The margins are so finite, there is no margin for error out here on this track, and Walker again looking to try and navigate through turns 1 and 2 to one of two great overtaking opportunities, this being the first of them on the lap. But the issue they've got, Paul Warwick giving a little bit of a toe to Chris Burridge, which makes it doubly difficult for Wayne Walker.
Yeah, so you got a whole little bit of team action in some places as well for some of the other M1 racing cars, but it's riding that curb that's so critical. So it's like surface paradise. It's almost like Adelaide Parkland circuit. There's a few places here where you got to get the car up on the curb, getting, just enough of it, but not too much of it, and having the right inputs in the car when you clip the curb. So important there at turn 3 by the looks of things. And again, the traction zones out of these corners are very difficult.
They are, and this is going to be a rear limited style circuit because of it, so you'll be seeing that the later you go on into a stint with the tyres, the more likely you're going to see the rears lighting up and trying to get through the middle of the corner, trying to stamp down on the power. You're always waiting, and just wait later and later as the stint goes on. Over the curb then through 10 and into turn 11, and you're going to see different lines through 11 from drivers going through. And something to note as well, when this track's not in use, what they're running over right now, the run over towards turn number 12 and 13 out on track. This is parking on the outside line, so the apex forms over a very dirty piece of circuit out there with probably some of the least used tarmac out there over the course of Detroit.
And seeing the drivers struggle in the traction zone off of turn 6, Robbie Griffith didn't get it quite perfect. David Nash passed him on the way down towards turn 7. And David Nash is one of the drivers I saw and thought, he's way out of position after qualifying. Definitely can be a top 10 driver at times, but he qualified down in 28th. He's moved up 7 positions so far, and he just got one of them a lap ago.
Yep, so David Nash is making his progress through. In comes Damien Cares, Michael Whiting and Matty Parker here at the end of lap 8, the start of lap 9. So they're making their strategy known out there at the moment, and they'll be certainly hoping that they've got what it takes now to profiteer on places if it does work for them. Now, we talk about tyre life being important. You gain a fantastic advantage if you go and pit in, get a brand new set of tyres. They're good for about 3 to 4 laps or so, David, before they start wearing away that advantage and you pretty much plateau. So that's going to be what they look at. Damien Cares for Accelerate Sim Racing there, 16.8 in the box, back out and away in 37th position.
Yeah, the optimal tyre temperature for maximum grip on these tyres is quite a bit lower than where they end up settling at in a long race stint. So you get new tyres and they're really grippy as they warm up and go through that optimal grip temperature, but then they sort of plateau at a temperature above it where they've got a little bit less grip. Every time we've had a safety car and they finish the safety car, they go racing again, and they're so fast for a lap or two, no matter how old the tyres are, just because those tyres have had a chance to cool off. So temperature sensitive as much as being wear sensitive, these tyres.
Definitely not a H-pattern shifter there. It's a push-pull gear lever there for Damien Cairns as he runs on through, holding the same gear throughout the entirety of the run forward, flicking down one more gear, looking there into second, and down to just 71 kilometers an hour before running on through and just thinking about what do I need every time that I try and go into these corners. He's just having to think and think every time. This is a track where you do not get to rest around here. You are constantly active on the brain. You know what? He gives a good thumbs up to say, hey, how you doing, everyone? Because we're on board with me at the moment on stream and running. So he'll be quite happy the fact he's got a little bit of screen time out there for the sponsor on the left-hand side of his picture, but he'll be happy he's got a bonus point in the back pocket, and now he's trying to work.
Bit more of a shucker than a thumbs up, but he knows we're riding on board with him, and he's one of those drivers who's taken that strategy to take on a bunch of fuel before lap 10. So Cairns, Kirby, Whiting, Parker and John Gallen, all drivers who've taken on fuel. Chad Lewis, question mark, maybe took on a tiny bit of fuel, but not a significant amount.
No, definitely didn't take tyres. He just went up on the jacks, if anything. Now, this is Sean McNamara now looking to get aggressive with Jordan Ross. We were seeing it for a moment, but as we do, we can see troubles in the wall for Scott Mackey, who's got himself the wrong side of the barriers here, and will have to dive into the pits then and get his damage repaired. That was going in through turn 12, and it's easy to do. He just overcooked it in, found the tyres. They have one fast repair available to them over the course of the race, so he can get a fresh car and go back away. You can see the front left tyre absolutely battered in. Stephen Varga had his own issues there for Quantum, having to do the old flick spin to get himself back going again. But Scott Mackey here, we can see, was making this run through, but it's going to be a long while before we find the trouble. In fact, we'll find it here. He just overcooks it on the brakes. You can see he's got everything locked up here, David, and bang, it is unrelenting into the wall.
Yeah, rear locking in the first bit. So then we saw him again in the wall off of the second bit as he was trying to stay out of the way and the car wasn't really turning. But yeah, rear locking on the way in there. So maybe he's not done the downshift how he wanted to, and it locked up a little bit on him. This is going to be a look at Dan Hall's penalty. So lap 1, he's into the back of Allman. And then as those two get spun around by the cars behind, we get the car park that we had, and you see why there was not much damage on any of these cars, but there was Dan Hall eventually spun around, and Allman as well, that everyone had to pick their way through, and not everyone could.
Well, he's a bit late in on the brakes. He turns him round and then he just tries to drive through him there. So Dan Hall, that is about as slam dunk as it gets on lap 1. You do have to leave a little bit of room. You can see a lot of three-point turning and co for the likes of Christian Smart, who desperately tried to stay out of the way of everybody. And then as he got back onto the power, he's there. So this is what happened to him on lap 1 as he went through. So he dives into the corner, completely misses it, and takes the car out from behind, because all of that is unsighted. You get yellow flags in front, you see the smoke, and effectively you go deer in the headlights. It's fight or flight when you get into that moment.
Yeah, so just a look at that again, where a few of them just got in, didn't really understand how much concertina there was going to be at the first really tight corner of the lap. And I got in too hot, sort of just drove into the car in front as the car in front slowed for the car in front for the car in front, and two of them causing contact there.
Yep, so
more pit stops as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve Kennedy and Scott McCoon have come in then and made their stop. Oh, that doesn't look healthy for Stewie Hall. So the other Hall now finding a whole heap of trouble. And that looks like that's happened at the earliest section of the lap, 1 into 2. So he's trying to get a broken car back. And if he can't get it back, that's surely going to be a safety car.
Well, it looks like he will be able to get it back unless that motor's about to pop without a radiator. So I think he's been in the wall earlier. I think he's broken the front left at the final corner, and then turn 1's really finished the job.
Well, we'll take a look here, going through that final corner. Is he just taking too much out of the track? Yeah, he just grabs the wall on the left-hand side, and then at that point, you're a passenger into the barriers there. You can see the front absolutely caves in, and Stewie Hall's got not much to do except limp his way back at what is the toughest section of the circuit to do so, because you want to have an incident, ideally, in the final section, not at the early. Ken Latta into the pits. He's still trying to go through. Wayne Walker in, Troy Stonestreet and Travis Hunt, lap 13 of the race. So we're now starting to see some of the, I would say, more up there players of the game starting to get that even strategy worked out.
Yeah, it's about time to pit anyway once we get towards lap 15 or lap 16, but a few of them might have anticipated the possibility of a safety car, because if that suspension had completely gone out or the engine had gone or something for Stewie Hall and he ended up stopped before he can get to pit lane, it would bring out a safety car. So stopping just before that is super beneficial, because then you could come in again under the safety car and then you're good to go from here. Whereas anyone who hadn't made their first stop, if there was one, was then going to also have to make a second green flag stop after the safety car that in the end doesn't look like it's going to eventuate.
Yeah, so with no safety car out there, they're all going to have to continue on, and they can't play to it, as Stewie Hall has now made his way down into the pit. So exactly what he was hoping for. Scott Gamble, your race leader, by 2 seconds here onto lap 14 here of 40. Jordan Ross and Sean McNamara second and third, and that's the difference between first and 24th. It is a difference of 44 seconds, which I would say is just about the level that you're looking at. He's the leader of those who have gone and pitted. Scott Gamble, the first of those out there. So you're looking at that difference here. It's quite a bit, but I'd say that gives you about
safety car.
7 or 8 seconds. Safety car is out.
This is fantastic for everyone who's already pitted. We knew this was a possibility. I talked about it. Get that first stop in early, but not everyone has been able to do so. You can only take one compulsory pit stop behind each safety car. So even if you came in again next lap, that's not 2 CPSs cleared, it's only 1 behind this safety car that has now been called. Your top 15, Scott Gamble, Jordan Ross, Sean McNamara, Jason Benson's the top 4, could be in a spot of bother here, and that's why we were looking at Ken Latta. His strategy to put 20 seconds of fuel in be very, very good for him, because now he can make his second compulsory pit stop behind this safety car, and he will eventually potentially cycle towards the front of the field. The rest of them are going to be racing around to get to pit entry as well, though.
I think that the safety car came out for Robert Griffiths, who's looking a little bit second-hand out there in his Chevy Camaro out there at this point. He looked like he was turned around at turn 2 and didn't have any way of turning himself back around again. So that might have been where the safety car came out, and it's completely neutralised the field and the strategy. So for those who came in a little bit earlier, it's been a mad scramble down the lane to get exactly what is wanted by it. And you can see this is just coming out of the pit here for Robert Griffiths. He now looks to try and stamp on the power out of turn 2 and immediately loops it.
That executive at Chevrolet did get promoted as well, so he's now vice president of something. But whatever it was, it did bring out the safety car, whether it was that. Yeah, because you look at Griffith's position there. He doesn't know when he can go. He's back, even if his car's fine, which it looks like it is, he's stuck there. Stewie Hall eventually got to pit lane. So everyone's been through pit lane now, but a few of them are going to do it twice. So Ken Latta's done his second stop now. Ken Latta is in 21st of the field, but he's made 2 stops, both compulsory pit stops cleared. Ken Latta's not going to have to stop again. Scott Gamble, Jordan Ross, everyone else up the front here are going to have to make a second pit stop that might even be a green flag pit stop if we go green from here. Ken Latta has positioned himself well. This is what we have previously called the Long Beach situation. Well, on the other side of the United States, it's now the Detroit situation.
It very much is a huge issue for those up at the front like Scott Gamble and Jordan Ross, that if those who have already got their 2 compulsory pit stops out of the way. Kenneth Latta was a driver who, you looked out there, he was top 5 pace. He'd only fallen back by about 7 seconds over the course of that stint. So you look around at someone like Ken Latta and you go, well, if he's only got 7 seconds dropped over the course of a run, you're looking at about half a second a lap. Half a second a lap over a pit stop isn't going to cut the mustard for a number of these drivers. The only saving grace is he's going to have to wait for the 19 cars in front of him to go and make another pit stop. So that's what he's looking at. We're behind, of course, the RaceKraft McLaren safety car out there at this stage. So at least for the time being, Scott Gamble, your leader, Jordan Ross in second, and Paul Warwick has moved himself up into 3rd position with the earlier pit stop. So great work by Warwick to get himself the jump on drivers like Sean McNamara.
Yeah, with one stop still to go for everyone in the top 19 of the field, there's a lot of variation about how much fuel they've taken to this point. So Scott Gamble took 24 seconds of fuel. Paul Warwick had only taken 13. Meanwhile, Jason Bentz has taken 30 seconds of fuel. He's basically one splash and dash to get to the end here. And all of that time that he spent in pit lane during this safety car, he's lost a little bit of track position, but he gets the time back, and you'll have a very short final stop. Of everyone who's been caught out by this safety car, Jason Bentz could be very, very well placed towards the end of this race.
Yeah, you're seeing back there the drivers who completed two compulsory pit stops out there, like Scott McCoon, who's back there in 40th position, trying to run himself back through, and as well Stewie Hall, who is looking to try and get through, and technically Robert Griffiths as well can classify himself as someone who's got those two compulsories down and on the board. This neutralises the field and does change the fuel game strategy, because they'll be running at about, I would say, pit limited speeds here, about 80 kilometers an hour around the circuit. So this is a great chance to save some fuel. And for those looking at the splash and dash out there at this moment in time here, David, that splash and dash becomes a little bit easier to deal with. It might just be a case of get up on the jacks, put the tiniest amounts of fuel in, like half a litre or something, go back out there and go again. I don't think it's going to be that drastic at the moment, but the more safety cars there are, the more time they spend running like this, the more likely that is to happen.
I would bet all of my chocolates right now that Scott Gamble, Jordan Ross, one of those two is going to set the fastest lap of the race when we go racing again at the end of this lap. It will be safety car in at the end of this lap. Scott Gamble and Jordan Ross will have cooled off those tyres, and they'll be ready to go like a bat out of hell, or like a startled cat, whatever, because that's what they're going to have to do. Scott Gamble, if he's going to take a good haul of points here, he's going to absolutely fly for the next 5 or 10 laps to try to build out a gap between himself and Ken Latta, because that's the only thing that's going to get him into the top 5 or on the podium, is if his next 5 or 10 laps are just absolute qualifying spec.
Yeah, we got a black flag penalty down the order for John Gallen, who's just served that and is going to be back off and away again after serving that 50 seconds in the lane. I think that might have been for speeding on through, but it is worth keeping in mind some drivers have lost position, like Jason Bentz. He's now outside the top, who's in 10th position exactly after that, so he's dropped a lot of places after being 4th position when the safety car came out, so he'll need to make some progress to go through. Scott Gamble will be very happy with what he's got, but he knows that his rear gunner in Sean McNamara is not going to be giving himself too much time to help. He's got to get by Paul Warwick, and he's got to get by Paul Warwick pretty quickly out there. The pace will be now in control of Scott Gamble, as the safety car will make its way around and will now look to try and find the pit lane. And once it has made the pit lane, it is pretty much a case of Scott Gamble's authority to try and go for it. So we'll see what happens then as he look to try and set that line up here. Coming out then of this corner, he's going to wait even longer, and the longer he waits, the more predictable the jump comes. And you can definitely sense that Jordan Ross is there, ready and waiting. So he waits to the latest of latest moments, and I absolutely do mean the latest moment, because he waited for that final corner to get that launch. We're back underway in racing here on lap 16. Onto lap 17 they go, and crucially, it's just enough of a launch then for Gamble to get what he wants. And now McNamara immediately needs to get by Warwick, and he's got to run.
Good run through turn 2 from Jordan Ross, but not enough to challenge Scott Gamble. Here's Sean McNamara looking straight down the inside of turn number 3, getting up all over the curb. There's a man on a horse statue down there, but there's a whole heap of horsepower where Sean McNamara has not been able to get past Paul Warwick, who is fiercely holding his ground.
Yeah, he is very much realising I'm in P3 and I'm here on merit, so I am not going to relinquish any position that goes out there and tells me otherwise. This is a big moment in the race for the likes of Sean McNamara, who's got to try and find this clearance. Over towards turn 7 then, coming off a Strand Drive. No dice, wide though, goes Warwick ever so slightly. That will compromise him through the entire Scott Fountain section of circuit and make that drive through. You've got Chris Miller waiting here, John Latham waiting behind Burridge and Poynton and Taliancic and Bentz. They're all there, they're all lining up, trying to find themselves a chance through. Remember, in that group is Kenneth Latter back in 20th position because he's got Gary Buckland in front of him. So he'll be certainly looking to slice and dice his way through some of the drivers who are a little bit out of position.
Yeah, and Latter's made one spot on this restart lap, so he's not just waiting around for Scott Gamble and everyone in front to have to pit. He's got good speed. He's getting his way through a couple of positions as he can here with Gary Buckland and then Craig Friend, the two drivers straight in front. You want to stay tight through turn 1 to really open up turn 2. And Ken Latter's not quite able to do that to give him a run on the straight down towards turn 3 here. What he doesn't want to do is throw all of it away because he'll know the strategy position he's in. Definitely heading for a top 10, but he's so late on the brakes.
Oh, he's trying everything he can here to get as close as possible. He's got that move then into 19th sorted, so you're definitely looking around and saying Kenneth Latter is throwing everything he can, and he knows that to make the move he's going to have to be late on the brakes. He is going to have to take chances around here to gain these places because he can't afford to stay in the mid-pack and see that go. You can see the face of concentration on Ken out there at the moment. He is definitely eyes firmly focused on what's in front of him because he knows it's Craig Friend first up, then Jeff Thomas, then Rob Chrisdale, and then you're looking around there the likes of David Nash and Tim Nicol. He's got to go through the entire gauntlet one at a time because he can't afford to bleed the time. He's already 10 seconds here behind Scott Gamble, and transit time over the lane for a splash and dash is not that much.
Pace on the restart lap, not quite what I might have expected from Scott Gamble. Probably having pitted underneath that safety car, he didn't quite have perfect temperature, but he does go and take away the fastest lap of the race now. So Scott Gamble is flying. Jordan Ross goes even quicker. Those two have so much pace. They're absolutely the quickest drivers, but they left their first pit stop too late at a track with a high chance of a safety car. Now they're going to have to show incredible speed if they're still going to pull this off.
Yeah, and that speed is going to be massive in terms of getting every single possible move done. Everything that you think you can manage is going to be important. Now, they are going to be starting to settle down into the second half of this race shortly, and there's a little bit of side-by-side and almost a slight bit of contact going through around Greg Sharp, who is very much on the radio at the moment. Oh, and trying to cross the beams up there. Did he get a bit of wall on the outside as he went on through? Yes, he did. So Sharp having to deal with Wayne Walker and co, and he'll be very much in communication with race control at the moment, trying to get whatever's happened out there as he's got Luke Ullman behind him, all worked away, but never what you want going through a technical section to go too wide and battle the way he did.
He was already on the radio to race control because he thinks he got bump and run probably by Wayne Walker there, which is why he didn't want to leave him a whole lot of space a couple of corners afterwards. So there's a whole lot of feeling already between these two. Or maybe it goes back to here. Michael Stewart getting into the back of Wayne Walker, and then he sees it.
Wow. Well, Michael Stewart throws it down the inside, comfortably gets the pass. The question's going to be on the exit here, what happens? So Stewart here through, oh, that's where it is, turn 2. He feels like he's unsettled over the top of the crest, and then that's what he feels is the bump and run.
Yeah, then completing the move down at turn 3. So a bit going on there for Greg Sharp, no doubt. He's not happy about that treatment.
Go back live. We've got to go back live for third place because Warwick now around the outside tries McNamara, trying to get it sorted. Oh, they lean on each other as they go along Strand Drive. Here comes Sean Latham to the party, almost 3-1. This is sensational as they head themselves over to 7. The look down the inside. It's still held up by Paul Warwick, who will not let anybody go.
That's why track position is so key here at Detroit. This is costing a whole heap of time to some really quick guys there, like Sean McNamara, Chris Miller, Mike Taliancic and Jason Bentz in behind this, as Paul Warwick has his elbows out, defending third position. The lead's 5 seconds up the road already. And this is why, gambling on the safety car. If you had nothing to lose, you had everything to win by taking the first stop early. Are you a body language expert? What's Sean McNamara thinking?
No, this ain't on. I'm losing so much time. My race is going away. I've got to clear him, but this is almost impossible at the moment. Look how much he tries to set up turn 2, but on the exit there is still just enough from Warwick to hold off, and Warwick moves over a Carl Witz to say, I'm going to defend this position with everything that I've got, and again he's got it covered as he goes into the corner. McNamara will feel pretty hard done by after the contact that they had between each other to think, oh, I've got to go through, but look at what it does a little bit further back. Mike Taliancic making the pass through on Mark Poynton, so he takes a place there and moves up to eighth position. So each and every turn is costing, and we're talking about 5 seconds down the road now. Scott Gamble and co is, and this affects the entire group going on back down. So this work being done by Paul Warwick might actually be Gamble and Ross's best friend.
Jason Bentz is looking pretty racy back there in 10th position as well, just in behind Mark Point, and he's showing his nose everywhere around that he can. So you really do race so close around here, but it's because the passing is difficult. Because the passing is difficult, we're not seeing many clean ones, and it's all about either having that clean air up front and having pace, or taking a gamble on the strategy and seeing if front-loading your pit stops is going to pay off. We are still about 20 laps away from knowing, maybe 10 when everyone else has to pit, of knowing if front-loading those stops was a good idea for Ken Latta and others. Ken's making a spot, and he's only 15 seconds behind the race lead right now as well.
Yeah, so only 15 seconds, I'd say, is still in the wheelhouse at this stage as they run forward 80.
The final stop for Scott Gamble's probably going to have to be somewhere in the range of 30 seconds. So we know the pit lane transit's 15. I think he needs about 10 to 15 seconds more fuel as well.
Paul Warwick goes around, contact into the barriers. Paul Warwick turned by Sean McNamara, whose patience ran thin.
It's an incredibly damaged car.
He's going to be able to get back around.
It's an incredibly damaged car as it's all boiled over in that fight for third position.
He sheds the front, and now he's got to limp it back, and I don't think we're going to see a safety car out of it. Paul Warwick, who did God's work on the defence there in the Fishy Motorsport car, will now find that his reward for such things is massive drama. McNamara tried on the outside, looked around for it, and look at that, they just hooked together because he thought he had a channel, and there goes Paul Warwick into the barriers, and that is pretty much an awful way for his race to end, and race control will be on it like a flash.
Yeah, you look at it from McNamara's position, he's all the way around the outside here. The Warwick can't make up his mind, so Warwick holds shallow, and then McNamara's like, my nose can go there. Then Warwick comes back across, and it's, excuse the pun almost here, massive fishtail before Warwick ends up in the wall after just a little bit of contact way earlier down the straight. I think McNamara's done that, but McNamara didn't know which way Warwick was going.
Well, Jason Bentz looks like he's been caught up in something as well. So Jason's not going to be too pleased unless this is his strategy play, because it doesn't look like too much happened to him over the course of the lap. He didn't drop place, I didn't think, out there over the course. He was right there behind. This is the second compulsory from Jason Bentz.
And it tells me a lot because he's just stopped for 10 seconds of fuel, having taken about 30 beforehand, so giving him a total of 40 seconds of fuel drop. So Scott Gamble probably needs 16 seconds more. 15, 16 seconds more of fuel. Jordan Ross probably needs about that and a second more as well. So it gives us an idea now of these second stoppers. How close does Ken Latta need to be to the race lead to still be in this? And the answer I'm thinking is somewhere between 25 to 30 seconds.
Travis Hunt then on screen. This is too early on the power, and he does nose it into the barriers coming on to Strand Drive 2, and he'd have to wait for the entire field to go by before he finds the reverse button and says, I can continue on with my race. But 8 seconds lost by McNamara to his teammate Scott Gamble. Back out and away with the fast repair is Paul Warwick. He's now down right at the back of the field here in 41st position, and the way he was driving, he was looking like that would have been a driver of the day performance had he held it all together.
Well, he was going to lose out somewhat when the second stops came around because he was 10 seconds shorter on fuel than everyone he was racing wheel to wheel with. But it's a street circuit. You try to take some of that track position and you try to hold it. So he was doing the lion's share of it, but he needed to either block the inside to every corner, be predictable that he's covering the inside, or not cover the inside. He was sort of in a halfway house, not really communicating to Sean McNamara how he was going to hold off Sean McNamara. So McNamara was sniffing one side, sniffing the other. Unfortunately, a little bit of contact as Sean McNamara misjudged it, and that's what's happened. So this, I think, is the true and real battle for the race win. Scott Gamble versus Ken Latta. Scott Gamble with about 15 seconds more of fuel to take and one more compulsory pit stop. Ken Latta, who's cleared all of his compulsory pit stops, is back in 15th position and 18 seconds behind. Scott Gamble needs to be half a second a lap quicker than Ken Latta and keep doing it, and then find some space out on track to feed back into after his pit stop.
And crucially, he'll have fresher tyres to work with, and he's doing, I think, exactly that. Look at that. It's a second a lap at least over the last 3 laps against Kenneth Latta. So I'd say he is doing the lion's share of the work, because Latta here is stuck at the moment behind Jeff Thomas, and those tyres have to last to the end of the race. So I think this is a case of tyre management as well by Ken Latta. He's got to be very astute to each and every scenario out there, and the difference is going towards turn 1 and towards turn 3, the difference is out there. They drive along Central Avenue over towards turn 3, where they're stared down by the man on a horse statue, which I believe here, David, is the Alphaeus Starkey Williams statue.
I'm going to assume he probably didn't invent any brands of car, but he might be very important to the people of Detroit and to Michigan. He's also got a good view of Canada.
He's got a fantastic view of what goes over.
What did he do? Did you Google it?
I'm on Google Maps and I've got my eyes on him, so that's effectively what we got. That's all I can say for the moment. But at least right now, we got troubles. We got troubles. Varga again for the second time at turn 3 has overcooked it.
Well, that's why there is a runoff underneath the man on a horse statue there at turn 3. Big straight braking zone that he has misgauged. Also taking a look at John Gallen judging that, and Jason Bentz isn't going to be all too happy with that, but it was just Gallen getting it wrong earlier on. Not too much damage for Bentz.
Well, the front clip there looks like it's taken a little bit. You can see the front right wheel is exposed now for Jason Bentz. That's going to be hurting his fuel mileage out there. Stephen Varga here was trying to maintain his place, but you can see he just can't get it stopped. Just struggling. And this time he can't even do a flick spin to get it back round. This time he's got to do the Austin Powers.
Dramas for Chad Lewis we're hearing, and this is a look at what's happening to Chad Lewis. He's lost his front bumper. This is how it's all transpired. So that's at the end of the strand. Yeah. That's from turn 7 into turn 8. He's tangled with Stephen Kennedy. Few damaged cars. Chad Lewis is heading his way to pit lane. Alphaeus Starkey Williams was a lawyer, judge, journalist, US congressman, and Union general in the American Civil War. This is a slightly less civil war.
Well, that's 4 involved in that one there, and Kennedy, not much he can do. He just got into the corner slightly deep and found a car on his line, and that's what happens at street circuits. Rob Crisdale caught up, Dan Hall in there as well, so a lot of drivers finding themselves wrong place, wrong time, but all the while, you can't get much more power down than that. Right behind Talianich is Mark Poynton. Poynton's pushing.
Well, there's a few drivers who sense a little bit of opportunity, but a few drivers whose sort of struggles and inability to pass is sort of boiling over in some reckless and potentially ill-judged moves. We're also seeing some just clean air mistakes from drivers who aren't being pressured, as the challenges of racing a car where the tyres are heating up and going away from you, right up against the walls, over the bumps, camber changes, the tall curbs. A few drivers getting caught out by all of it. We're seeing mistakes, we're seeing damaged cars, and then we're also seeing a little bit of beef between drivers' teams as they try to battle for their positions.
Craig Friend dives in. This will be his final stop out there, so he's got to be quite alert to now how he navigates around. So this is going to be big. A penalty in for Sean McNamara, and we're not surprised by that. This will not count for a CPS, and he has been dinged essentially by race control, and we'll see that podium go up in smoke.
He did misjudge it as he was trying to pass Paul Warwick for the third place, made contact with Paul Warwick. There's more dramas going on elsewhere. It's Darren Goosey, and he thinks he's been helped into whatever trouble he's got going on right now. He's not at full pace, suggesting there's a bit of damage. That car doesn't want to turn left, so I'd suggest that could be a little bit of the damage as well for Darren Goosey.
Yep, so Darren Goosey will have himself an opportunity then to plead his case and try and get out of any respective issues that he's got, trying to get a bit of retribution out there on circuit. But we're now into the final third of this race, lap 27 here of 40, with Scott Gamble leading from Jordan Ross, but pit stops needing to be found out there at this stage. Some great underrated drives. In comes John Latham in to follow McNamara in. So John Latham will make his final call. He's the first of the leaders then to go and make a stop. So where he comes out compared to Ken Latter, I think is going to be really important. Latter is already making his way by right now.
You've also got to factor in, though, how long was the first stop from a bunch of these drivers, because if they went short, they'll end up a long way behind Ken Latter. If they took quite a bit of fuel, they could be close to him. Ken Latter's gaining positions as we go. A bunch of other drivers are making their pit stop times, as you see there. So Latham up to about 16 and some seconds, 13 seconds for Matt Vanderkraan. Rick Sharp about to hit his stall, and the Darren Crosby also taking on the fuel. And up into 10th goes Ken Latter. Most all of those drivers pitting now have ended up behind him, but Scott Gamble had 10 seconds on basically the whole field as well.
Yep, so those extra 10 seconds, I think, are going to pay dividends by the time that the pit stop comes back out and around. McNamara, by comparison, has come out just by the pit lane transit of the drive-through penalty, right behind Ken Latter. So what he could do is he could help Scott Gamble out and start attacking Ken Latter for position. That could be the next point of the game. We can see Matt Vanderkraan there, 13 seconds in the box, 33.6 seconds overall. Goosey has got himself a penalty then, so he's got that to try and navigate his way around. I think that's an iRacing penalty out there, but we are firmly now pit stop watching here as Gamble, who thought that he had the chance to break away, still can't shake off Jordan Ross here. I think Ross is playing a very coy game as Miller's in and Burridge and Poynton, they all jump in trying to cover off John Latham.
So I suspect for Darren Goosey, what that drive-through penalty is going to be is the 17x incident count. So scraping the wall, going off track, contact with other cars, all of that will have stacked up to give him a penalty. Jordan Ross, I'm seeing connection problems for. I think they're all back. So Ken Latter, he's still cycling his way through. What's really interesting, though, is that Sean McNamara was 8 seconds behind the race lead, took a drive-through penalty, ended up just behind Ken Latter. It suggests that if Scott Gamble's got to take more than 8 seconds of fuel, he'll end up behind Ken Latter.
Well, this is where McNamara can really be a thorn in the side of Latter, who's been having to navigate through the traffic, but for the first time now has himself some clean air to work with to put the lap times down. I'm not sure if Kenneth knows what pace he needs. Oh, Kenneth let him go. He's hit the wall on the right-hand side, trying to let McNamara go through, knowing that McNamara is not his race. So Kenneth Latter, being the gentleman there, maybe left a bit of time on the table to do that, and that might cost him the race win.
Yeah, well, he'll know. He got close to the wall. He'll know that McNamara still has a pit stop coming up in 1 or 2 laps as well. So he thought, you get out there, I'll follow you for a tiny bit, but I just need to be clean right here and still have some tyres left underneath me when I get towards the race lead. So there's your track map. The right-hand side is Ken Latter. In the bottom left-hand side, negotiating turn 3, is race leader Scott Gamble. Gamble still needs to go through that pit lane that you can see. I think this is still shaping up pretty well for Ken Latter. So long as those tyres last, we are seeing that the rear tyres become quite difficult in these long runs.
Yeah, so Jason Bentz is the driver who's really profiteered by going early on his second compulsory out there. He's got the jump on John Latham by about 3 or 4 seconds, and Latham's got to clear Scott McCoon, who is also 2 pit stops in. So Bentz has got Stone Street, Matty Parker and Brad Doble to try and run himself through at this moment, launching down towards turn number 3, out on track, and he's close, he's too close. He's gone straight into the back there of Troy Stone Street, and look at how it junks up 3 wide, sneaking on by. Oh, brilliant stuff there by Scott McCoon, who found the only gap there in that run, and now look at it, it's like a parking lot waits to go through traffic as they look to go by, and there's Stone Street. He gets the place back, but Bentz loses out. Latham's through.
Well, he was trying to redress it, and you don't need to go into deep cuts of supercar history to know that redressing in a pack like that can lead to more incidents.
Chris Miller turned around, gets on race control, contact with Stuart Hall. Matt van der Kraan also gets turned around there in that issue, and that was big in the context of this one. Van der Kraan can't go through. In comes Jordan Ross. I think he heard all of what was going on and decided if it's going to be a caution that comes out, a safety car, he's going to want to jump in, get that stop sorted. So where is he in compared to Kenneth Latter? Latter is already through, and so now the chase is going to be on from Jordan Ross.
Yeah, Ken Latter's got a good little bit of time on him, to be honest. It's basically half the length of this straight here. I think it's going to work out 5, 6, maybe a couple more seconds. So that's good. That's track position for Ken Latter.
Everyone
10 laps to go.
Race control right now. Wow.
Well, one incident caused another. I think Chris Miller was trying to profiteer off the stacked up cars, and actually, maybe I shouldn't say that if I'm not confident which driver it was. Someone tried to show their nose down the inside of turn 6 here when we were all too wide, super checked up. It was never a move that was going to work, and it spun, I think, Van der Kraan around.
So Tim Nicol here, the 23 car, has been caught out then and has received a penalty. So he's been involved somewhere in all of what has gone on over the last couple of laps and finds himself in. In comes your race leader though. Scott Gamble comes in to make the stop. Question will be whether he's followed by Michael Taliancic. I would suggest not, because Mike will take the extra bonus point if he can take it.
Good assessment on that one. Michael Taliancic is going to stay out for just a little bit longer. Scott Gamble, is it going to be 10 seconds of fuel? Is it going to be 15 seconds of fuel? It's going in now. If it's more than 10, I think he slots in behind Ken Latter, but he could have a lot of spare pace to burn in the remaining 8 or 9 laps here. The answer is about 12 seconds of fuel. Ken Latter has track position.
Look at
Taliancic and the others have so much speed.
Oh, Jordan Ross is going to be so hard done by. He was stuck behind Wayne Walker for position. He couldn't clear him, and Gamble's got out ahead. Such unfortunates there for Jordan Ross. He got caught, wrong place, wrong time, trying to make the move. He gets the pass on Wayne Walker. He still stares at the 9.5 car in front.
Ken Latter has 4 seconds on Scott Gamble. So Scott Gamble needs to close down 4 seconds and then pass to try to take a race lead away from Ken Latter, who's going to inherit it when Michael Taliancic needs to make his stop. That's the game in this back half. It's worked out pretty well for Ken Latter. What he still needs is some amount of tyre grip, tyre temperature in these final laps, I think.
Well, look at that. That shows you something. 2.2 seconds on that last lap. Kenneth Latter with a 34.4 on that last lap. He realizes now that the fangs are bearing down on him. Those tyres, remember, when he came in, it was at the safety car period. So that would have been around lap 16 he would have been looking at for his second stop out there. He has been trying to nurse it, but he did lose 1.4 seconds on his last lap. So he has certainly dropped a lot of time over lap 31 out there, and he's been having to go very careful about the way that he goes about it. And you look at that gap now, it's just down to 2.2 seconds, and the Wolves are chasing behind. So Scott Gamble realizes he can catch Kenneth Latter, but this will be for the race lead if he can get it net overall, because we know Talyancic has to come in, and we know that Sean McNamara has to come in. So Kenneth Latter, he might just have to get 6 laps of blocking boots out here at the Detroit Grand Prix Belle Isle.
Best case for Ken Latter here is that when Scott Gamble catches him, Jordan Ross catches Scott Gamble, and Jordan Ross, having made his 2 stops now, we're in this final stint, maybe less patient than he's been in some of the earlier stints. What Latter will be desperately hoping for is Gamble and Ross to throw a punch or 2 at each other. He just needs something to buy him 1 or 2 more laps, because if you threw the checkered flag in 3 laps time, I'd tell you Ken Latter can hold on to this. But 7 laps is looking like a long run with how much more grip Scott Gamble has got right now.
Well, this is what happened. Hall there getting an absolute clattering there into Chris Miller, which sends the chain reaction into play. But look out for the race lead, because Latter has now been caught out there in front. This is what happened to Tim Nicol here as he went through for the Quantum Racing car. 3 wides they went in. Oh, straight on goes the group behind, and they go flying off, and Latter's let them go. Kenny Latter's just let them go for the race lead. He's given no resistance.
Boo. But the pace difference was insane. It was 2.5 seconds per lap. There might be a little bit of fuel management going on from Ken Latter as well here with the kind of pace he's got. But it could also just be he's got some of the oldest tyres of anyone. So for net race lead, for actual race lead, Scott Gamble goes through, Jordan Ross goes through.
He fainted pit lane and didn't go. So I think there he was just letting them through, knowing I don't want to fight you. It's very gentlemanly from Kenneth Latter, but you sit down at it, that's a chance for the race lead that he lets go and slip. He could have fought for it, but ultimately Scott Gamble and Jordan Ross, it's now Jordan Ross's prerogative to try and stay with Scott Gamble, who's taken that and run with it. It's now 1.1.
Also, you've got to give full credit to Wayne Walker here in 4th place. He's on the same strategy as Latter, and he's only 2 seconds behind him. So from what I can tell, Wayne Walker's on for a really, really good result here as well, running in 4th. Damien Cairns running in 5th, same deal. He's done this before 1 or 2 more times, the Long Beach situation. He's got David Kirby behind him. So really, outside of Scott Gamble and Jordan Ross, the rest of your top 10 is that those drivers who made the early stops. Drums for Tim Nicol.
That's turn 3, and that is not the healthiest front there for Tim Nicol, who will be looking around at that, hoping it stays on. So he's able to get himself back going again. You can see how much marble build-up there is now at turn 3 from how much they've been throwing the tyres in. But Tim Nicol does not look good, and look, he's absolutely smashing up against the walls here. And I think if he's not careful, he's going to really struggle to bring that home. He should park that.
Well, maybe he just needs to knock 10 kilometers an hour off it. There's the race leaders, and he stopped.
Oh, now that could throw a spanner in the works, because this is late, but late enough that a safety car could come out. So if Tim Nicol needs to get the tow away, that's in a very dangerous part of the circuit. He'll need to be sighted there on the right-hand side. He requests his tow now, and we might just see a safety car come out for it. So this is a very, very tight section of the track, and there is the safety car, and Jordan Ross gets the reprieve he wants. Scott Gamble will have his head in his hands.
Well, my goodness, the second safety car, you thought the probability of 1 was high, probability of more than 1 was still pretty decent around here on this street circuit. For reasons like that, it's going to slow us up. If Ken Latter's got problems with tyre temperature or fuel mileage, it could save him, but it also brings up a whole bunch of quick cars on fresher tyres right up to the back of these cars that are on the same strategy as Ken Latter. So Ken Latter, Wayne Walker, Damien Cairns, David Kirby, all on that same strategy. Look at Damien Cairns, honestly, plus 27 positions and has cleared his compulsory pit stops.
Well, top 5 at the moment for him. And remember, he was in trouble as well, I think, and had himself some issues early on. So he was very early to go and make his pit stop. So he had to be very switched on in terms of what he was doing because he was so far down the order. I think Damien Cairns here, he is making a big run here for driver of the day, and the only other drivers I think who are close in that regard are going to be Brad Doble and Matty Parker, who are 9th and 10th.
Yeah, I give a lot of credit to everyone who pitted before lap 12 and then took the fuel fill at that first safety car. They got themselves a whole bunch of positions and free fuel that's then cycled them forward. We go to this second safety car though. Some of that time that they had in that back pocket is erased. So you look at drivers who stopped a little more recently, like Sean McNamara, who's now down in 14th place, who could be super, super racy. Same's true for David Nash, Jeff Thomas, Steve Grumley as well. So you've got a top 10, top 12, 14, and then a few really quick cars that were on the wrong strategy initially that now get some of that time back and might look to use their shoulders a tiny bit when we go green flag racing again, which I think will have us with 2 or 3 laps to go of green flag racing.
I think we will. So at this point, keep an eye on Michael Taliancic making moves. He's got Michael Whiting in front. David Kirby he'll look at. Damien Cairns, he'd certainly hope to get back in the top 5. Then Wayne Walker, then Kenneth Latta. But at least for the top, it is currently Scott Gamble and Jordan Ross. And you do start to feel that at this moment in time, the biggest question mark around Kenneth Latta letting that place go is if he decided to defend for 1 lap longer, he would have been at the front and he would have got the safety car he needed to be safe on fuel.
There's got to be something we don't know, because it's not like he, got down the straight and rolled out of the throttle and let him go. He stood on the brakes out of the final corner here, and he was so eager to jump back into 3rd place. I think he's perhaps thinking to just bank the result. Like, he doesn't want to tangle whatsoever. He doesn't want to get his elbows out like Warwick did, and kind of became his undoing, is that even if it's not your fault, you don't want to be in a position where someone else could wreck you. So I think we'll learn something from Ken Latta after the race about his thought process in all of this, because it isn't what either of us expected him to do, was it?
No, I don't think it was, but at least at the moment, the lap cars now are getting the chance to unlap themselves and rejoin the back of the field at a lap down. You've got Tim Nicol still stuck in the pits then, so that looks like he's done. But what we do know is that the safety car will be in at the end of this lap, so the opportunity to go out there and attack again, they're going to get 3 laps to figure this out at the front. Scott Gamble and Jordan Ross have played rough shot with the front of this race the entirety of the way. They have felt like A and A1 positions as they've gone through. Michael Taliancic is the nearest challenger behind that, who's got to make that progress work, but you're still looking in and around. There's a lot of drivers in that top 10 who are going to be desperately clinging for that top 10.
Yeah, super interesting. So recapping a couple of those massive movers that you can see on the timing column left of screen. 27 positions gained for Damien Cairns. Brad Doble and Matty Parker following the same strategy, gaining 28 and 25 positions. Scott McCune is plus 32 after he didn't qualify when maybe he should have. But he's gained a whole bunch of positions since then. When did he stop? Yep, he took one of those early stops and then stopped with the safety car. So same strategy as we've kind of been following Ken Latta doing.
Well, likes of Matty Parker and co are now going to be getting their defensive mind sorted. You got drivers like Jason Bench, John Latham, Sean McNamara trying to find a way through. You've got Troy Stonestreet who's looking to try and recover back through. Everybody now is looking to get themselves set up for what is a 3-lap sprint here at Detroit. And look at Jordan Ross. He does not want to let go of the shadow of Scott Gamble running his way way through towards these final couple of corners. It's a really cold track here. They run fixed weather conditions. It's only 21 Celsius out there at this stage, so I wouldn't say it's too much, but where he waited a long time earlier, he's gone quick this time on the restart. So this is a big bold call by Scott Gamble. We've had the turn. We're now looking at this. We're at Detroit Belle Isle. We're at the river. Then it's going to be a showdown between these drivers through turn 2. Ross looking for a run here. This is the best time he can attack Scott Gamble, who's hard over to the inside. Now moving over, try and get things sorted. Ross angling to the inside. Can he be late enough on the brakes? No, not yet.
Put a whole heap of pressure on. Scott Gamble's restarted in front of Jordan Ross on the previous restart as well, so he had to do something different this time, or Ross would kind of predict him. Even then, it was just a good enough race restart to fend off that pressure from Jordan Ross. Ken Latta, is he looking a little racier now? Everyone should be a tiny bit quicker now that their tyres have cooled off. 3 laps to go. They should all be pretty light on fuel as well. What that does for the balance of the car, not sure, but outright pace should be pretty zippy right now from all involved, even the 24-lap-old tyres on Ken Latta.
Yeah, they've had a chance to cure, and of course going through a heat cycle is going to bring them back level more with the cars in front. So Latta now having to defend a podium on board with Wayne Walker in the Walker racing car. Not close enough to really make a move to attack with Damien Cairns waiting in the wings, trying to find a way through. Taliancic's through on that restart on Michael Whiting, so he'll have David Kirby, eyes full of grandeur, trying to get that next sort of move. 2 laps to go coming along, and Jordan Ross still at 0.4 of a second, needs to find a little something.
Yes, Taliancic has got super fresh tyres here with a whole bunch of 25-lap-old tyres in front of him. It's 7 and 8-lap-old tyres for first and second. Jordan Ross still super close. They're all sideways coming over that crest at turn 2 as the road goes over the little creek, and it unsettles the car, and they have so much attitude and body language. It's what other GT cars don't have that's kept Australian supercars in business. Oh, why haven't they gone GT3 yet? Because no other technical reg has just quite the attitude that these cars have got.
McNamara then finding his way through into 12th position. That's Scott McCoon that they're dealing with. Jason Bentz now down the inside. He gets it done. Who would you rather be on the final lap here, David? Would you rather be Gamble or Ross?
Oh, give me Gamble, give me that race lead and a little bit of track position. Jordan Ross can be very, very clinical and precise, but that means he's probably not going to fence you off with an ill-advised and poorly measured move.
Well, that's going to be key. McNamara back down to the inside then. That's 11th position now as he comfortably dispatches a double. Huge accident in the back, and the track's jammed. The track's jammed as they go through. Scott McCoon there, caught out with a massive accident, and they're all trying to navigate through, and they clear it, but there's more spins. Bam! There goes Gallen into the wall now. Big, big dramas with 2 laps to go. Will they neutralise the race for it? I doubt it, because we're soon coming on to the final laps as they go on by, and the drama is that Scott Gamble has lost the lead to Jordan Ross. He's lost the lead to Jordan Ross in all of that. How on earth has that happened? That was coming out then as they came together. They might have come together on the final penultimate lap. All happening now. You got Cairns now in 5th. Kenneth Latta leads by 1.8. Dramas now as Cairns gets caught up. Huge issues now. It's a free-for-all out here on the final lap. Kenny Latta leads. We thought he gave it up. We thought he gave it up with a lap to go just before the safety car. We thought he gave it up. Gamble now in 2nd position. Jordan Ross now in 3rd. Race control's going to be all over it and have a lot to deal with. Jason Bentz there. Scott Gamble's not going to be happy there. Safety car is called. That is going to be that. Kenny's only gone and done it.
We're green. We stay green.
We stay green. So they're going to call green because it's the final lap. So that's going to be big. So they've called off the safety car. A little bit of confusion late. But now Scott Gamble, I think, is going to be out of time. Kenneth Latta's only got a handful of corners. He passes the James Scott fountain on the right-hand side. He's now going to find himself with an opportunity here as he exits now to turn number 11. He's still got 1.1 seconds in the back pocket, and he's just got to manage 2 final corners. The last big braking zone. He goes through the right corner. He gave it up with 8 laps to go. He will come around the final corner. Oh, Kenny boy! Kenny boy! He wins at Belle Isle!
Well, high drama between the rest of them. Jordan Ross dropping even further back. We'll have to dissect it. Ken Latta from hero to third to hero once again as the final 2 laps with 24 corners and had 24 incidents of drama. Damaged supercars, mangled machinery. High drama, and I was wrong. You didn't want to be Scott Gamble in the final laps on that restart.
No, you didn't. You wanted to be Kenneth Latta, apparently, as they all make their way through. We've got to see what happened. I believe it was turn 11 where it happened on the penultimate lap of the race, which set off the chain reaction as they all scramble over the line. A lot to dissect, and I'm sure post-race penalties are going to be flying left, right and centre after this one. But Jordan Ross and Scott Gamble coming together with a lap and a bit to go, I think was the main talking point, which we just missed because there was a massive accident that came along just a handful of corners before. So there's everything and more that happened over that final stages. We'll try and put up a replay when we can, but oh my word, that might just be one of the most dramatic V8 vet finishes we've seen in a very long time.
Start to finish, everything. Just strategy variations. Ken Latta booking his ticket with that very early pit stop, gambling on a safety car early to help him, boost him. It did, but he would not have planned on, bet on, anticipated these final 2 laps from the cars in front. Just dramas, and dramas. So that's turn 2, but really on the penultimate lap at turn 7 was the start of some of the drama.
Tally turning Damien Cairns, and Cairns doing everything to keep it out of the dramas there. It might have even been a lap car there, so Damien Cairns just avoiding huge dramas out there. Still gets a big day, but look, we just missed it there. So let's run it back a little bit here, because it's coming into turn 11 where it happens. So into the 7-11 complex here. Through turn 8, you can see Scott Gamble, your leader, Jordan Ross here in second position, and it might just be a lunge gone wrong. It looks like it. Look, he sets it up, he dives for the inside. Oh, he just tags him in the rear. They both make the contact, and watch Kenneth Latta here. He's awake to it, and he just dances on through.
Wayne Walker almost gets through to second there as well, but he doesn't quite clear it, and then he gets run out of space by Scott Gamble there. Jordan Ross gets back through, having already redressed on the previous one, and this is where we picked it up. Like, what is going on? Second, third, fourth, fifth. My word.
And 6th. Taliancic finding himself in there, trying to get involved in. Through all of that, watch the car on the last lap of Sean McNamara. Sean gets an absolutely wonderful run through. Look at that, pins the throttle down, never lift, and he gains about a half dozen places through that one move.
An hour of excitement in the final 3 minutes. So, man, it just opens up for McNamara. It just opens up.
Where's that gif of Casey Kerwin going Moses? That was exactly what happened out there for him. McNamara getting a little bit of luck, and then, of course, that contact. Jordan Ross will take it from an onboard perspective here to see if he could have done anything different here. So you can see he's trying to line it up. It's a little bit early there on the brakes. Oh, he's just cooked it in deep. The nose is showing there. Half a gap is open, but it's just that half a gap. Jordan Ross is not wise enough to see that that gap is never going to be fully open. He needed to be right over the curb if he wanted to make a lunge like that.
Does Walker get fenced by Gamble there?
I think he might.
There's just so much happening. Corner after corner, just so much happening. Taliancic was like 3 taps on the rear bumper of Damien Cairns as well. There's so much to dissect from every single angle.
Oh.
Walker had his nose in front around the outside there. Now, around the outside there is not where I would want to be, but Walker's got his nose in front the whole way.
At this point, all these drivers are reacting. They're not being proactive, and this is just final lap, recover as much as you can. I think that at that point, you know, you go into a narrow-viewed vision, and I think it's very easy for someone like Wayne Walker to get fenced in that sort of scenario. An absolutely crazy issue, and that final 2 laps could be analysed for an hour, but we've got to get through to race results here from this incredible finish here from Detroit Belle Isle. because after an hour, 7 minutes and 29 seconds and letting the leaders go by with a handful of laps to go, he gets rewarded with the race win back again. Kenneth Latter gets it done by a second over Scott Gamble in the 9.5 SimSport car, ahead of Jordan Ross, who'd finish on the final spot of the podium. Of course, stewards pending. You got Wayne Walker, who's fourth, and the magic run on the last lap from Sean McNamara after having to take a drive-through penalty for his contact earlier on in the race. He's able to recover it back into P5. Michael Taliancic is sixth, ahead of Jason Bent, with John Latham finishing in 8th, Michael Whiting in 9th, and you could arguably say here, David, a great candidate for driver of the day, Damien Cairns.
Yeah, I think I'm still number one vote, Ken Latter, but yeah, Damien Cairns, phenomenal, plus 22 spots. He qualified best of his ability. It's not like he threw away his qualifying or didn't qualify, and then he took that same strategy gamble that others did, and he thought, the way I would have played it from 25th place on back, he did that. Things fell in his favour, and then he really held himself well thereafter.
Brad Doble then would be 11th position ahead of Stewie Hall, who had an up and down and all-around style day. David Kirby leads David Nash 13th and 14th, with Jeff Thomas and Travis Hunt, the two JWM SimSport cars, then getting 15th and 16th respectively. So then Chris Burridge there in 17th, ahead of Chris Miller. So to Chris's 17th and 18th, with Rob Crisdale 19th and Darren Crosby rounding out 20th position, 21 seconds off the race leader's finish time. And look at that then as they get close. Christian Smart and Michael Stewart 21st and 22nd then overall, with Greg Sharp and Dan Hall 23rd and 24th. You then got Gary Buckland and Steve Kennedy, and it was close there between Kennedy and Poynton. Poynton falling late back to 27th, ahead of Luke Ullman and Chad Lewis. Matt van der Kraan having himself the turnaround, of course, with the incident with Hall and the co there, who dropped down the order. Paul Warwick, who had his contact, of course, with McNamara earlier on in the race, drops him down to 31st, ahead of Steve Grumley and Stephen Varga. So two Stevens, two different spellings, 32nd and 33rd. It's then Robert Griffiths and John Gallen, who we saw turned around late with 2 laps to go. Troy Stonestreet also involved in that, with Darren Goosey, Craig Friend and Matty Parker, the last driver on the leading lap. Scott McCoon would be classified as 2 laps down, and also classified would be Scott Mackey and Tim Nicol in 41st and 42nd, meaning that all 42 drivers who started this race got classified results overall. We're going to take this time, though, to start talking to some of our drivers, and we do have to start with car number 269, who is here with us right now, and that is Kenneth Latter. Ken, you let it go. You let that race lead go with about 8 laps to go. How on earth do you get into this position where you get handed it back to you on a silver plate?
Oh, geez, I don't know. Normally, I'm not really one for luck, and finally, it's come back my way. I don't really understand it, but you got to take the good with the bad, and this is one of the good, so I'll take it.
You certainly will. Now, talk us through the race, because you had a blinder of a strategy call, taking the early pit stop, and then the safety car comes out in your favour, which allows you to take that second compulsory pit stop. What was going through your head there? Were you just looking at trying to get a nice, easy stint over to the end of the race, or were you expecting, the cars to align and you being in a race lead battle?
Well, when they were starting to come up on me towards the end, I realised I was probably like a couple of litres short or something like that. So like throughout that full last stint, I was trying to save fuel, and when they finally caught up to me, I just let them go because I knew I didn't have any fuel to play with. And like after they passed me, I've managed to get it to a point where I could start to sort of turn on the juice a bit, and then the safety car came, and then as you could sort of see, it sort of just fell apart at the front at the end, and I nearly threw it away myself on that same lap.
Well, everybody was holding on for what they could. It was a manic finish to this race, but it's a huge race victory for you. How much does that G you up for the next rounds of the championship? I know you got Okayama coming along in the week, so how are you looking at that after a massive victory here at Detroit?
Well, I think it gives me a bit more motivation. After last week, I put a fair bit of effort in, and qualifying didn't go well, and then the whole race didn't go well. Didn't end up finishing that one, so I was a little bit deflated, so didn't put as much in this week. So looks like definitely I feel like I'll have a bit more motivation to push for next week and hopefully bring home another result.
Well, the motivation is there and the floor is yours here, Ken. Anybody you'd like to thank? It's a huge victory for you here today in the RaceKraft V8 Vets at Detroit.
Yeah, well, bad luck to Scotty and Jordan. It's unlucky for them, but that's the way it is. And thanks to all the guys at Fishy. You know, they've always been behind me. And you guys, Race Control, and our sponsors, Western Motor Group, Infinity Design, DC Shades, Battery Warehouse, Early Beach, Hanlon Esports, MJS Gaming, Index Design, and Whittaker Electrical Device, and I don't know, there's too many of them. But anyway, that's everything, guys, and thank you so much.
It's all of them there. Ken Latta, a big win for him here at Detroit. He'll be having a smile from ear to ear. Second position would be Scott Gamble in the 543. He's managed to wander down and find David Haynes.
Well, Scott, another one of these fuel strategy races at a circuit that was a high chance of a safety car. You were nearly a high chance of a safety car yourself right at the end there. I mean, 40 laps, I don't know where to start, other than when that first safety car came out and you hadn't made your first stop. Did you think it was going to be a struggle from there?
Yeah, I was a little bit worried because Paul Warwick got the undercut. You know, he underfueled his car, so he had a big second stop coming up and got between Sean, and it was great having Sean there to put the pressure on Jordan as well. So Jordan was looking in the mirror, and then Sean got held up for those 5-6 laps and fell off the pace with it. But it was and then that last stint leading up to the last stop, I guess, and then Jordan came in a lap earlier than me. I was thinking, was he saving fuel? Like, I was hoping I was pushing enough so he didn't have to save fuel. And and I was a little wondering whether he'd come out and get held up a little bit. So, I mean, I had to pit the next lap and cover it. And fortunately, we got out in front because it's such a hard track to pass on, especially, someone like Jordan or Sean, and so we just gave it our all for the 39 laps. It was unfortunate what happened at the end with, Jordan. He apologised profusely. I know he's kicking himself, and that's just what happens. Racing, it's pretty unfortunate. I was a little gutted by it because I really missed 2 weeks, and I put in a bit of work this week to get used to this car and get back into the sim. But it is what it is. So we'll just kick on to the next round, which is Okayama, and congratulations to Ken and to Jordan as well, for filling out the podium, and Ken for the win.
And how did this new car go with the circuit? It looks like, pretty short gears, very easy to spin up the rear tyres in all of the traction zones with lots of slow corners.
Yeah, well, see, I haven't driven it for the 2 weeks leading up to this. I haven't raced or anything. So for me, this was the best set that I've had from Jamie or from vets that we've raced in. So I felt it was all right. And it's a blast to drive this track with this car, even though you're 3 seconds or more slower, a lap. So, but it's still a blast. And, it's really good fun. It's just, for me, maybe the car, and I know lots of people love it, but I've sort of said it from the start, maybe the car's a little too forgiving. And where if you run wide, you can sort of hold position, no worries. Whereas, the old car in Gen 2, if you ran wide, that was it, you're over. So there is that, makes it a little bit more harder to pass. But the racing, the whole field is tighter together as well. So you can't afford to make too many mistakes, especially in quality.
Just seeing you might have left your signature on a couple of concrete walls out there across the laps as well.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not paying for mirrors, because there'd be some floating around, and so they'll send the bill to Sean and they'll fix up the car up for next week, mate.
And that 17x incident limit, I only saw 1 or 2 drivers go over it, but was there ever a risk that it was something you had to manage?
No, not tonight. I was disappointed. I picked up a 1X, or maybe a couple when we had that incident with Jordan. But leading up to that, I had a 1X, which I was disappointed with because it was a clean race, and I just broke a little bit early and cut the turn at turn 4, I think it was, and went over the grass a little bit too much and picked up a 1X there. But prior, that was all I had till that incident. So, yeah, I didn't think... I think if you're picking up the incidents limits at this track, you're probably taking the wrong line because it's such a narrow track. You can't afford to really be too far offline. So I think if you're picking up lots of incidents for off tracks, you're probably on the wrong line.
Well, super exciting racing. Track position was king. Safety cars almost seemed like they were likely before the start of the race, and we love when some different strategies begin to converge towards the end. Yours could have been the victorious one, not quite to be at Detroit.
Yeah, not to be. I really wanted it. I did want it. I'm not going to be shy. And it was what it was. And, I'm happy with P2. I mean, so, yeah, well done to the guys tonight. Like I said, for Ken, I'm happy for him, and for Jordan getting P3 as well. So, yeah, I got no malice towards it. I just knuckled down. Got to work at Okayama next week, and, just get back and enjoy racing, guys.
Looking forward to seeing more of you racing again this season, Scott, and see you in a week.
All right, thanks, mate.
Well, there we have it. That was Scott Gamble. Now we'll take the chance to jump to third place overall in this one, which belongs to Jordan Ross, who's with me right now. Jordan, I guess the most stark and important point to touch on was what happened with a lap and a bit to go. You and Scott coming together in the race win, and the opportunity of that just falls through your fingers.
Yeah, it was a dodgy old move, mate. Scott deserved that win. He was definitely in a class of his own tonight. So big apologies to him, but you got to have a crack. And I told him that he's welcome to return serve this season sometime when the opportunity presents, and I won't be too upset about it.
Well, it's all fair in love and war sometimes as it is, but just talk through the pace that you both had over the course of this race, because you two look like you're in A and A1 positions for the majority of the time out there, that you had the pace. You've had the pace all season, brand new to the V8 Vets, and with the championship lead coming into today by nearly 100, you got to sit down and say, even though you've not got the victory here today and it's P3, it's still a good points haul that you're taking away from today.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to get a penalty or whatever, but yeah, it's all right. In that first stint, those two 9.5 guys looked like they had it dialed, and they were doing something different to me, so I tried to learn on the run. And in that second stint, I tried to do a few things different with the bias and just how to drive the car. I was watching their lines and stuff, and it seemed to be, I seemed to be able to go with Scott in that second and third stint. Did try to undercut him towards the end there to try and get the race lead, because I sort of was close to him at the end of that second stint. But yeah, just got held up a little bit on my outlap, and it was close, but no cigar today, but we'll try again next week.
You absolutely will. Of course, you've been putting in the time and the effort here with Synergy Sim Racing. I know that a couple drivers have left the team at the start of the year. So in terms of what Synergy's looking at and your results now you're starting to put together here in V8 Vets, what's the outlook looking like at Synergy for you, and what are your goals and aspirations over the next 6 to 12 months that you're trying to sort of get out with the team?
Yeah, we sort of had a bit of a shuffle round at this month and going into the 2025 season, and mate, to be honest, we couldn't be happier with how it's all panned out. We've got a couple of new guys in the team, and we're sort of all up and about. We've got the first round of the Pro Series for qualifying series coming up next week, and we've got 6 entries in that. Myself and Adam Briggs are already locked into the Pro Series for 2025, so we're hoping to get another at least 3, 4, hopefully 6 SSR cars into the Pro Series for 2025. But mate, the team's looking really good. It's in good shape. They're all working really well together, and they're all up and about, and looking forward to the season ahead.
Well, we'll wish you the best of luck when Okayama comes calling in 7 days' time. Before we let you go, though, Jordan, is there anyone you'd like to thank?
Mate, thanks to all you guys and the organisers for putting on Vets. It's awesome. I'm loving it. And mate, that was congrats to Kenny. But yeah, that was Scott's race tonight. I took it off him. So hopefully he can get a win before the season's out.
Those are the breaks sometimes, but ultimately Jordan Ross comes away with a podium finish, 3rd position overall, and he'll be looking at that with a little bit of a smile, a little bit of a sheepish one, it has to be said, with what went on the final couple of laps there, David. A fantastic race here at Detroit for a number of different reasons, and the best thing about V8 Vets is we get to do it all over again in 7 days.
It had absolutely everything, didn't it? It had close racing, it had strategy, it had some safety cars. What it didn't necessarily have was fairness or justice right at the end. But Ken Latta will be very thankful for it. And Scott Gamble and Jordan Ross, such great competitors as well. Hope we see plenty more of them.
Right, let's have a debate then. Driver of the Day, presented by Chubby Buns Burgers. I think there's 2 candidates for this. There's your candidate, of course, David, in Kenneth Latta picking up the victory in the manner that he did. And then, of course, you've got Damien Cairns, who, while he was up there 5th with about a lap and a half to go, did fall back to 10th with a bit of contact that came along. I think either you can make a fantastic claim for to be the Chubby Buns Burgers Driver of the Day.
I think Cairns was in 5th before he copped that contact. I reckon if we want to give it to Cairns, we can give it to Cairns.
Well, if we're all happy with that, we'll happily say that car 88, Damien Cairns, will be your Chubby Buns Burgers driver of the day here today. A race that was up and down and all around, and while it isn't the 27 spaces gained, it is still a gain of 22 out there. Kept it out of trouble for all bar the final lap, which wasn't necessarily his fault with the contact that he copped. So you got to take a look at Damien Cairns. That's the sort of driving that we love to see here in V8 Vets, and he will be your Chubby Buns Burgers driver of the day. That is going to bring the curtain down for today as we move on over just a little bit across the globe over to the former circuit TI Ada. This is the Okayama circuit. It's a track that all drivers should know like the back of their hands because it is iRacing free content, and you'll see that with us on 7 days from now on the 6th of February. Join us from 8:30 p.m. Australian Eastern to get yourself in on the action with us at SimSpeed TV. And it's not just SimSpeed TV that has brought it down. Of course, this is the RaceKraft Simulations V8 Vets Championship, and it is brought to you in collaboration with Logitech G, Nova Sim Sports, Parramatta Isuzu Ute, Player One Sim Gear, LGC Images, Chubby Buns Burgers, and with SimSpeed as well. From the entire team, from Dan Yeaman, from David Haynes, and myself, Jake Sperry, sometimes you have to give to get, and that was a case of charity on the fuel being rewarded with 1 safety car and 1 massive moment at the pointy end of the field. It's safe to say that this championship is not going to be the same after a round like this one at Belle Isle. Ken Latta, give yourself a big smile and a pat on the back. It's a victory for you, my friend, here at Belle Isle, and that is what we get. We'll see you in 1 week's time when we jump over to Okayama.